Hello, hello. Welcome to the Tenfold AI podcast. I'm Heather Snyder, joined by Matt Scanlon, and this podcast is sponsored by Promode.ai. Promode, the only AI marketing platform specifically built for B2B companies. It does everything. It does your blogging, your social media, your SEO, your email marketing in a handy portal. It takes an hour a month. You click approve, you move on with your life. It's amazing. It saves a ton of money, custom content. It's incredible. Highly recommend you check it out. If you are a B2B mid-market business owner, that's construction, manufacturing, professional services, commercial services, whatever. Whatever you do, Promode will be your best marketing agency on your screen ever. Hi, Matt.
10 out of 10 intro, Heather. Best one yet. I love it.
I've had 3 cups of coffee today, I think, something like that. And we're both under the weather, mucus and congestion and all the fun stuff. But we're going to, we're going to do what we do.
We're here.
We're here.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited. We always do a little chit chat before we start a podcast. Full disclosure, we're 2 founders of a tech company. Promode.ai is our baby, and we're running this thing all the time. We're selling, we're talking to clients, we're doing product updates and all the things. So when we do these podcasts, we kind of jump on a few minutes before. What's on your mind? What's on your mind? I write a few things down, and usually Matt has more AI industry news and fun things for you guys. And then my goal is to kind of be the voice of you and ask the questions that you might ask if you were in this conversation, to kind of bring this information to our listeners, to the business owners that we work with in a way that they can really grab hold of and take into their businesses and use in some smart ways. So sometimes I play dumb. Oftentimes I actually am. It's a very authentic role with some of the things Matt talks about and the deep AI tech stuff as I'm learning as well. Real quick, I don't think I've ever kind of really talked about my professional background, but I think it's important as I'm kind of describing this podcast and what we're doing. My background was on the marketing agency side. So I was director of strategy at an agency for years, consulting with clients, B2B business owners primarily, putting together strategies and selling those engagements. So over the years, I've heard every client complaint about agencies that I think can exist, from long approval times and we're paying too much and we're not getting enough value and why is this so difficult and a pain in the ass and you guys don't understand our business. I've heard it all, and Matt and I have kind of used that knowledge base that I had along with Matt's knowledge of AI and software development to create a solution to all of those client problems that I've heard over the years. So when we talk about marketing, I might chime in a bit more. When we talk about sales and business growth, I might chime in more. When we're talking about AI, Matt's the go-to guy, and I'm happy to learn along with everyone listening as Matt educates us.
I do want to highlight something that happened this week, Heather.
Yeah.
Just apropos to what you're just saying, I think one thing that a lot of founding teams miss is somebody who deeply understands the problem that they're solving. I mean, I don't want to get distracted right now. I'm tempted to get distracted, but we had an instance where you were having a conversation with a client this week, and you text me, and you're like, "Man, she loves this thing. Like, this is great." It was just like awesome feedback. You know what I mean? Whereas me on the product side, I'm like, every day, I'm just like, somebody's going to hate this. Like, there was you know what I mean? Just, you're building a new product. There's snafus that happen, like we had an API go down for like 20 hours this week. And, I initially go to the fact that, okay, all of our clients are going to leave now because of that. And so right in the middle of this experience, you're telling me all of this great feedback from a client. And I bring all that up to say, that one thing that a lot of founding teams miss is somebody who deeply understands the problem that you're solving as a company. And that is one thing, like, I did not quite understand the depth of the problem that we were trying to solve with Promo until you really laid it all out to me. And so I think that yeah, just your deep understanding, like really visceral, emotional understanding of these problems that are being solved for clients is an absolute game changer. It's unlike anything I've really ever been a part of. And this week was really, I mean, like I said, we were like smack dab in the middle of an API being broken because of a vendor of ours, like completely outside of our control, but just 20 hours of pure panic. And in the middle of this, I get a message from you talking about how much clients love this thing. And that just goes to show that, like, if you're building something like product first or technology first, and you're missing these key problem sets, you know what I mean? Experiences like a, broken API can be absolutely devastating for you. Mm. But if you're, if you're building a company sort of like problem solution first, and then reverse engineering your technology around these core problems, you can absorb these little normal hiccups that any new technology or company experiences. So it's
amazing. I love it. And I'm excited for more companies with similar beginnings to Promode, especially for other department solutions, and I've talked about this before. I'm excited for, a seasoned HR person, so who's been working at an outsourced HR agency could do the same thing. Take that deep knowledge that you have of client services in the HR space, what's missing, what could be improved, where are the bottlenecks, look at that whole kind of life cycle of that client, partner with an AI genius like Matt, if you can find one, and make an AI solution that replaces that outsourced HR agency. The same thing could be applied into many other, business units as well. So I'm excited for more of those types of companies to emerge where you do have, yes, it's software, but because of AI, like you talked about in one of our recent podcasts, with Promode, you took an org chart of a marketing agency, and then you built AI agents to sit in the seats that would otherwise be in a marketing agency. And then you layered that onto retrieval augmented generation technology, which is enterprise level AI tech. You kind of merged those things together to create this powerhouse of a marketing engine. I just think, maybe we're getting higher on our own supply a little bit, but to me, it makes some sense to start a business that way.
100%.
With a deep understanding of the problem. Like, what are people actually experiencing? Yeah, but I'm excited. So what's new in AI? Last week we talked about DeepSeek, and I have to tell you, I'm sure you saw that there's a Lex Friedman podcast that was released a couple days ago.
That's so good.
I started it, man. It is dense. It's 5+ hours long. I think I'm about an hour and a half into it. And I got to say, my brain sort of like deleted some files from listening. I was like, oh my God. But the guy he was interviewing, I don't remember his name, talked like a damn robot. And he did that Silicon Valley upspeak. Do you know where he's like, so we train the systems and then we do this and then we do this and it's like this. And it's this upspeak pattern that just had me wanting to just jump off a damn building. But I'm sure they're very smart. There was a lot. But I know you had some updates to the DeepSeek news, and we've both been reading and listening to some things about that. But what's your hot take on DeepSeek this week?
Yeah. Well, so last week, when I was actually editing last week's episode, I was a little bit nervous about how boldly I had my DeepSeek hot take as being primarily market manipulation. That that the numbers are way overstated. But I do feel very vindicated with my conspiratorial take. Since that occurred, so like, and I also felt bad because my source material was like some very deep Reddit threads.
I saw it was a Reddit thread.
I was
It's
like,
are we sure this is accurate?
it's like, I'm really going out on a limb here with my source material, but I was very confident in, that the cost to train DeepSeek, there's no way that could be true whatsoever. But now, so since then, there have been a lot more reputable, less conspiratorial, non-Redditors doing a deep dive over the last week of this. So this will probably be common knowledge by the time this comes out, which will make me feel even better for being vindicated for my conspiracies. So, High Flyer. So this is a hedge fund. So there was a big move towards machine learning in trading. So this is back in like 2017, 2018. You may have heard of, I think we talked about Billions last week, actually. So do you remember in Billions, there was Taylor. She was the quant. So a quantitative trader using these machine learning models to make trades. So this became super popular in the late 2010s. And so it was actually hedge funds that began to assemble some of the early GPU clusters to do machine learning on all of this trading data. It was also some of the early precursors to semantic search and analysis. So if a press release came out, quarterly earnings reports, they would use early large language models to analyze these earnings reports and press releases to make these trades. So as it turns out, High Flyer is not like, High Flyer is the company that owns DeepSeek. I mean, they're not a tangential investor. This is the same company. DeepSeek is a department within High Flyer. So prior to the export restrictions, so DeepSeek showed their LLMs are trained in several different runs. So there's like pre-training, there's post-training, there's reinforcement learning. So the last run of training for DeepSeek was done on these A8 or H, is it 800 chips? Yeah, I think H chips. I don't want to, it really doesn't matter, but there's a chip that, due to export restrictions, the United States put export restrictions on certain types of chips with China. So there's a similar performing chip to the A100, which is what is kind of the gold standard right now. And so the initial training, what happened was High Flyer saw a greater value in training a foundational model than dedicating all of its compute power to quantitative training. So they made this shift and did the early pre-training of DeepSeek using their 10,000 A100 GPUs for the early training of DeepSeek. So
you're saying the cake was half-baked when they pushed go?
Yeah, the whole $6 million training thing is now fully debunked. Because there is no corporate veil. Keep in mind, this is the same company sharing the same resources. So there's no corporate veil between these two entities. They are one and the same. And it just simply, we saw, the most interesting thing here is that the value of AI has clearly shifted from quantitative trading to LLMs, to foundational models, are now worth more than machine learning training, which I find to be a very fascinating shift that the value of this thing far outweighs the use in quantitative trading. So I'm seeing estimates now. I think last week I had somewhere around like $120 million for the total training of DeepSeek. Now that this is all coming out about Highflyer and DeepSeek being the same company, and Highflyer reallocating its GPU resources fully to DeepSeek, now we're seeing that the DeepSeek total training cost is almost exactly that of 4.0 in the $500 million range.
So was this information not like available when the stock market day from hell happened a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, this information was available.
It was available.
Yeah.
It
This
just,
doesn't fit on a TikTok.
yeah. Okay. I see.
So I do think, and really I'm going to put a +1 in my tally of this being market manipulation, especially now knowing that it was a hedge fund is the owner of DeepSeek. So now I'm starting to, and I mean, I'll be honest, I spent about a day getting really into the Blake Lively controversy. Have you told all?
I mean, I've seen some things.
Oh my God. I read the court filing full, like beginning to end. I was fascinated by it. The reason I was fascinated by it is because I was wondering if like this will be admitted into the public record to the extent that PR agencies manipulate social sentiment online. And it was very fascinating. This is all in court record now, how this PR firm, they're exchanging text messages talking about how many fake accounts, how much artificial virality creating around these stories. That was the thing that fascinated me the most.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that if you're a hedge fund who is now also the owner of a foundational LLM model, you're probably going to take a short position, manipulate public sentiment about that, and you have hedged your bet. You've shorted NVIDIA. If you know what I mean, if this is the net result, is that if NVIDIA stocks go down, you can short NVIDIA, and then you are also an owner of the upside. Should that not work, you're the owner of the upside because you have the DeepSeek R1 model.
Playing the markets.
So I'm sticking by my conspiracy.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes sense. I think, investors and people in general tend to move in droves, like schools of fish, and often with very little information, especially in the stock market. Because, something I realized years ago working with companies, especially during COVID. So the last week of March in 2020, when the marketing agency I was with lost 40% of their clients and revenue in the last week of March of 2020. It was just dropping like flies. And I had to recoup all of that revenue within a very short period of time and sell like crazy. And so I got very creative in how are we going to backfill these clients and recoup revenue. Didn't want to see my friends at the agency start to get laid off, which is what would have happened. And so I started kind of paying more attention to the stock market, to the news, what's going on. And I quickly realized that the news wasn't as important as I thought it was. Because it didn't matter what was happening. What mattered was what people thought was happening. Period. So if I knew the facts about this was the bill that was signed, or this was the administration's decision on this, or this was the macroeconomic thing that is the truth, right? That didn't matter if the business owners I was interfacing with believed something else. And so I started paying more attention to Like, what is the emotional state of my prospect? What do they think? Do they think that the sky is falling? It doesn't matter if it is falling. It matters if they think it's falling. Because that is the reality of the sales conversation. Whatever they think is reality is what I'm up against in the sales conversation. So I stopped paying attention so much to news and started just watching the movement of the business owners around me. Are they shoring up? Are they spending money? Like, what's happening here? And by moving that way and kind of saying, okay, I can put the truth to the side a bit. Like, yes, I care what's happening, but who the hell knows, really? Like, we're both old enough to know you can't believe the news all the time, or maybe ever, depending on who you ask. To focus more on which way do I see the fish swimming in front of me and respond to that.
Heather, this is reason number 78 why you do sales for Promode. It is this, what you're describing now is an ugly part of myself that I know exists, but I have such a hard time. It's such a hard time changing it. Like it's so funny. We'll like, to peek behind the curtain a little bit. We'll get on these calls. Like every once in a while, I'll come in on a sales call because there might be some technical questions that need to be answered. And I love it. Always put a note in those that's like, hey, I just think we should approach this, just friendly conversation. No need to.
Yeah.
Because that is, my nature is to be like, yeah, this is what's going on. This is what you don't, I mean, it's a terrible habit.
Well, I don't think it's terrible. It's just it's a different function that you have. You have to build the product, and you have built the product, and you have to perfect the product. And so you need a scientific approach to running Promode in those ways. Facts matter. When you're building systems and connecting them with other systems, and, when you're doing all these things, facts matter. When you're dealing with humans, like that conversation you were mentioning, the prospect was sold. They wanted to move forward. They had some technical questions. They in particular wanted to know our philosophy on SEO, which maybe one day we make a podcast just about that, because we definitely could. And so she wanted a deep dive into what are we thinking? What's our philosophy on SEO? How does Promode answer SEO? And so prepping you, I said, look, she's already sold. She's moving forward. This is just a, learning conversation, meaning you don't have to bring your armor and your guns and all. You don't have to come with all of that energy to sell her. She's already sold. Is it just a conversation? Because what the facts are don't always matter as much as we think they do. And some business owners are going to think I'm crazy for that, but that's marketing.
Yeah. To the business owner.
World of marketing.
Yeah. I'll say, like, to the business owner that thinks you're crazy for saying that, you would not want, because me, I would go in there and be like, listen, you just wasted 50 grand this year on all this. This is totally unnecessary. You don't want to hear that business owner who thinks Heather's crazy. You'll be pissed to hear that.
Yeah. And I used to be a lot more like that, a lot more like almost like zealous about, fight for the customer and and you gotta like, blood, sweat, and tears. And now I'm like, look, I'm never going to care about your business as much as you do. And I shouldn't. Because every time I have cared about a business owner's business more than they do, what ends up happening? You end up with a client who isn't happy at the end of it because they were never engaged to begin with. That you were dragging them through the process the whole way, and then they leave and they're not happy. And it's like, well, you dragged them to your party. Like, no shit, they don't really want to be there. No, we kind of veered away, but just kind of talking about human behavior in what people bet on. Because that was the whole DeepSeek thing. What are people betting on? And I think we can draw that human behavior kind of correlation into many different areas and even into our own baby business, right? Yeah.
All right, Heather, I'm going to switch gears here. So, I am probably at the time that this comes out, so I got accepted into this AI mastermind. I think there's like 10 or 15 people in it.
Nice.
And so it was put on by I don't know if I don't want to maybe name them yet until I'm in there. But so it was actually started by a very forward thinking marketing company. So not an agency, but like, I'll try to give an equivalent. Have you heard of like building a story brand? Is that something that you're familiar with? Okay. So it would be a company very similar to that, very similar size, like, so
A
kind of just think.
branding agency.
Exactly. And they actually like train other agencies. So in the way that StoryBrand certifies agencies and things like that, a
Gotcha.
very, very similar type company and very forward thinking. They just had a change and they just had a new CEO come in who was much younger. And so they're really kind of asking serious questions that I think more people in marketing should be asking. Like, what does this actually mean for AI? Long story short. So part of this thing is you come every month, you come with different use cases. And so I want to use you as a test subject. I want to talk about how do you use ChatGPT? So let me start off with, no, actually, you just tell me give me a high level overview. What are some of the like main things that you use ChatGPT for?
Well, let me pull up my ChatGPT and I can tell you. I don't know if we want to screen share. It's pretty personal looking at somebody.
Okay. While you're pulling that up, tell you what, I feel my ChatGPT feels like one of the most personal things in my life.
It does.
Like it is in the way that,
Hello,
like,
sure.
isn't that weird though? Like I don't like, man, I'll give my phone password to like a painter over here. I mean,
Well, I mean, how quickly would you show someone your Google search history?
yeah, that's,
Because mine is chaotic,
we can see,
random.
look at those tabs.
Yeah, we got tabs on tabs on tabs. So I'm going to preface this by saying I am not a ChatGPT wizard, but I use it and I benefit from it. So I have different sort of threads of conversation happening.
You're in the 95th percentile, I would say, of users. I've looked over your shoulder enough.
Like, let me see one that I have used a lot. Okay, brand voice guide, Promode. This is what I've used for a few things. When I have a question about, well, asking it about email integration for Promode, integrating client email platforms with Promode. So this thread knows a lot about us,
Mhm.
so it kind of can answer pretty well. I don't generally copy and paste and use exact anything from ChatGPT. I'm more so taking inspiration. Our affiliate partner program, I did have it kind of polish an explanation of that
Mhm.
I did essentially copy and paste into a PDF branded for us, but I gave a lot of parameters in that. Here's a fun one. So I'm getting married tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm overwhelmed by the thought of changing my name because I have my name in a lot of places, professionally, personally. It's going to be an undertaking. And so I thought, I need a checklist. I need a detailed checklist. So I So this is how I use ChatGPT. I need a detailed checklist of everything I need to do to change my last name legally and professionally across the board. I'm getting married and need an easy to follow checklist that's comprehensive. What questions do you have for me to be able to provide this? And so it asks me where I am. Do you have a passport? Do you need to update your name with your employer? Because this was a fresh thread. It did not know that I'm a business owner. Banking and financials, legal and tax documentation, vehicles, property. So it's asking about, what do you have? Where is it? All the nuts and bolts. And so then I provide all of those answers. And then it spits out an output. And I said, great. And I thought, there's a piece of information I would like to have that's not in this spreadsheet. Can you please revise and include how to complete each step online and through that website and provide the link? And if applicable, and indicate which steps must be done in person. And so then it revised that and gave me a bunch of links and what I have to do in person, prioritized, you're going to want to do this one first. Some of them aren't quite as urgent. So that's a
This is
couple of
really
examples.
cool. Okay. So, I'm going to keep asking you some follow-up questions. So, because I noticed something in here. Well, first off, I oftentimes find myself saying, thank you, please, which is a very fascinating thing, how much that I do wonder, obviously GPT is not open source, so we can't see the extent to which niceties like that affect the model. But I do find that fascinating that I don't say those types of things I don't feel like I am tuning that particular chat at all when I say thank you. It is oftentimes very much a genuine outpouring of gratitude for the thing that I just got,
Yeah.
which is very interesting change in my behavior.
Yeah. I frequently say please. Don't always say thank you. I'll use exclamation points. Same thing. Like I'll be fairly expressive in my interactions with ChatGPT.
Mhm.
And here's one. Someone recommended a book to me, The 6 Types of Working Genius, and it sounded like a cool book. I actually did buy the book. So, I'm not a terrible person. But I bought the book and it's sitting on a table and I'm like, I have no damn time to read this book. I'm curious about the book. So I said, can you give me an easy to read 20-minute read synopsis of the book, 6 Types of Working Genius, that will help me get the value of the content without reading the whole thing? And so it gives me a nice little, I feel like self-help books are great for this because there's usually, a core set of things and then a bunch of fluff around it or stories and anecdotes. I kind of just wanted the highlights. What are the 6 types? I was kind of curious about that. Yeah. So that's,
Very cool. Okay. Now so I see you're using 4.0. Do you ever change that model for any task? Is that a thing that you ever consider?
mm, not usually. I have done I mean, I've done some stuff with the Canva GPT, but I don't generally switch the model. And honestly, I haven't ever been super stoked about the Canva GPT. That could just be that I didn't mess around with it long enough to get good at it.
So you've never intentionally switched on like 401 because you're on the you've got the $20 a month plan, right?
I think so.
Okay, yeah. Click on that Chat GPT 4.0 up there on the drop down. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So you do have O1. This is kind of what I want to get into is I want to talk about the reasoning models. So DeepSeek R1 is a reasoning model. But I want to understand from you when you don't get because I saw you with the I'm changing my name thread. You were like modifying what you wanted out of it, right? As you were going through that, it was like, okay, here are the answers. Like, well, first off, you asked it, say, ask me some questions to help clarify this. So you're introducing reasoning to the model when you do that, right?
Mhm.
And what do you like? Talk to me about how if you don't get an output that is satisfactory, it's not quite where you want it. What is your process of beginning to like tweak that output more towards your desired end state?
Well, I don't know. I feel like I'm not using ChatGPT for things that have zero margin for error
Hmm.
very often. I don't know. I don't know if that happens very much. Like I said, I don't generally copy and paste and use exact text. The quality control's pretty high because I'm not asking ChatGPT to do things that I couldn't do myself
Yes, you're using it as
generally.
like an accelerator of
Yeah,
the task. Yep, yep. It's
it's
very
not
interesting.
not a lot of high stakes stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, it is. I'm having like brand conversations, business conversations with Promo or with ChatGPT about Promode, but I also know there's you and there's my experience and there's my network and like there's a lot of safety nets outside of well, ChatGPT said to do this, so I guess we have to. It's more of like a resource that I consult. It's not a guide per se.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I really do think, I don't know whether you realize it or not, but like you really interact with these tools in a way that is like with where the technology is today with them, you really interact with them exactly where they are. I mean, I think this changing your name chat is a perfect example of that. I mean, shit, if you would sit there and make a list in a notebook of all of these things. And so what you did is like, you first said, ask me these questions, which then probably prompts you to like, okay, passport. That probably then institutes a whole, line of thinking of other things related to passports. You know what I mean? And then the acceleration of coming up with this final checklist is probably the most comprehensive and fast way that it could be achieved.
Yeah. And I also use it to do things I don't want to do
Mhm.
and things that I'm not innately great at.
Yeah.
I know that sounds contradictory because I said there's a lot of quality control, and there is, but, I hate running errands. I hate wasting time or doing things that I perceive waste time. If I'm going to waste time, I want to waste it the way I want to waste it. I hate searching for things and feeling frustrated. And to me, things like go figure out all the places you need to change your name and do that. That sounds boring. It sounds like it's going to take a long time. So when I have that feeling, and it is very much an emotion, it's like frustration, you know, I'm not going to do a good job at this because I'm not a super detail oriented person. I'm more like big swings and just make it happen. Just just move it along. So when I feel that, like, here's another example. A client needed a creative brief. Um, they needed guidelines for images um, to use and stock images. And I'm like, I don't want to go into Unsplash and Pexels and pull up a whole bunch of free images. It's going to take forever to upload into their Promode. And so what I did, create a stock image list with license-free links that show people succeeding, winning, celebrating, and anything else that would speak to a visionary, trailblazer, or someone with big ideas. Because we have a client in the sort of visionary motivation space. And so it provided a list of links to free images, descriptions of those images, and then I simply copied and pasted that and told the client, peruse these, see which ones you like, and we can add them to your media library.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, it's brilliant. Okay, so go ahead and stop sharing your screen. I want to talk about this like in the broader context of these reasoning models. So, like, I mean, honestly, after looking at that, you are really a super user, I would say.
Really?
I mean, and that's okay. So let me show you this. So, one of the things that differentiates these models is you've probably heard the term like this is a reasoning model. So the GPT 401 is a reasoning model. And so I've got an example here of what that would mean. Mm-hmm. So this is just like a little like a test question, as you're doing reinforcement learning on an LLM, these are the types of questions that researchers would ask it. So Oliver picks 44 kiwis on Friday, 58 kiwis on Saturday. On Sunday, he picks double the number of kiwis he did on Friday, but 5 of them were a bit smaller than average. How many kiwis does Oliver have? Now, without reasoning in the model, what happens is it is like, so if there's no reasoning in the model will look at 44 plus 58. So you can kind of see the math here. So then double the kiwis on Friday. So 2 times 44. Now here's this thing. There is a detail inside of this question that is from the user is irrelevant to the math problem. The 5 kiwis being smaller than average has no bearing final count of kiwis, right? And so, but if you look here without reasoning in the model, it is subtracting the 5 smaller kiwis. Mm-hmm. So you see this here in O1 Mini, you see it in Llama 3, 8 billion parameter model. So they're subtracting these kiwis. Now, what a reasoning model would do is it would have to take an additional step. So, if you just think about this like a human thought process, right? You would be, okay, this is a math problem. I need to multiply my Friday kiwis by 2. There's a 5 in here. And the words that are related to 5 are the word but, 5, smaller, right? And so like if you're not applying reasoning to this question, you would just say, okay, -5, just looking at that, glancing at it, and not taking the moment to ask yourself, is the size of the kiwis relevant to this question or not? So these reasoning models then take a step of identifying what is relevant to the current problem that I'm solving. I'm doing a math problem, and then the size of the kiwis, I need to determine if each bit of information is relevant to the overall problem. So it goes through these reasoning steps to give you the output. To go back to one of your examples, okay, let's use that image library that you were just talking about. Heather, you as the user applied a reasoning step where you said, images of people experiencing success, celebrating, et cetera, et cetera. You were actually applying some reasoning to the model for it in that moment. This is where I think a lot of people misunderstand how these things work. If you did not give it its reasoning, you would say, hey, give me a bunch of images for a motivational speaker, right? It would not take the step to say groups of people experiencing success in a business environment. That the cost to do that run, so the way that you did it, the token cost on that was probably maybe a penny. Okay. So maybe cost 1 cent for your version of that because you applied the reasoning. Now, if you were to ask a model to apply the reasoning that motivational speaker equals groups of people experiencing success, now all of a sudden that run is costing you a couple bucks. I mean, that is the cost difference that it takes to produce the number of tokens to apply reasoning to these large language models. And so I'm getting somewhere with all of this, I promise, at one point. So here's kind of a breakdown. So like, if you were to like come up with a budget estimation of how do I ask this question that maximizes my budget for this LLM run, come up with that budget, and then feed your prompt into the LLM. So a use case for this, when we talk about what is the current state of this technology, one of the biggest things I hear people say all the time is sales enablement. Can I just give you a CSV and you sell for me, right? It's a promise use case that we see all of the time. Nobody is thinking about the amount of reasoning that would go into nurturing 10,000 contacts into a CRM. So when we see sales enablement today, really what that means is I'm just writing an email for you. There's no reasoning going into that, because if you had 10,000 prospects in a CRM and you were to deploy actual sales enablement where there are reasoning steps that occur on a per lead basis, I mean, we're talking one lead. Let's say that you've got 100 data points on that one lead. You want to open up the floodgates of allowing this thing to search the web related to that lead. We're talking about your run costs on a per lead basis are in the hundreds of dollars.
Really?
I mean, that's why nobody would be paying for this, because if it were actually working, it would cost way more money than a salesperson would.
Mm-hmm. So let's kind of define run costs, because we're talking about the hard costs of operation for LLMs or large language models, the AI brain behind things like ChatGPT and Gemini and all of those things. So those hard costs are dependent on the reasoning or complexity of, it's kind of, correct me if I'm wrong in this analogy, but it's like, if I think, let's compare it to thoughts that we have as humans. If I think, okay, I have to go to Target, and I do have to go to Target, then my next thought is, I need to return something at Target. Where is that thing? Is it in my car? Is it in my kid's backpack? Like, where is it? And then I think, do I need gas on the way to Target? Or do I need gas when I'm done with Target? And then I think, am I going to get groceries? Am I going to get anything frozen? Do I need to do any other errands before I go to Target because I'm getting ice cream at Target and I don't want it to melt in the car? Like, the ultimate task is go to Target. But then there's all these other reasoning components around that thing. So each of those reasoning moments of, should I get gas? Will I have ice cream? All of those things would warrant, in the LLM world, an API call.
Exactly.
That have a hard cost attached.
It would be a whole chunk of tokens. And at the very beginning of your analogy, there will be a step that is, does Heather like going to Target, or would she like to minimize the amount of times that she goes to Target? That would send an entire logic tree of that decision making.
One moment, someone is in my house. Must pause.
All right, so we're back. Heather, you had a home invasion last time.
Yes, we're right back. We haven't slept since the last moment of this podcast or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I did put on the same hoodie that I was wearing.
You did?
Oh,
I couldn't
going.
remember what I was.
Okay. So we were talking about when your realtor came over, we were talking about the cost of reasoning models and how basically a lot of the promises of AI, like the potential applications of AI, specifically agentic and reasoning models, these things are theoretically possible, but today the complexity and cost of them are just so far off base. So being that our podcast is all about avoiding shiny objects, one of the biggest shiny objects, in my opinion, is the gap between what's possible in the future and what exists today. So I was rambling like a son of a bitch last we were doing this. And so I put some specifics around it that I think might highlight this. But I want to ask you, Heather, because you've worked in sales before, to see how, or before you are sales. Okay. So I just want to see if some of my estimates here are correct. So I want to check in with you. Now, so I have an example here of sales enablement. So this is like this is a thing that everybody is clamoring for. Can I give AI a CSV file or give AI access to my CRM? And these agentic tools just sell my product for me. I don't have to do anything. This is amazing. Now talk to me about this. So I'm using an example of a CRM that has 5,000 contacts. So let's say that you got a hold of this CRM for the first time and you are going to go through and nurture the leads in this CRM. What does that look like? Like when you do that, like what, like how many emails are you sending? How many times are you culling through that list? How many times are you partitioning leads to other sequences and things like that? Just rough idea what goes into that.
Yeah, so the general school of thought, there's some differences in the exact number, but it's somewhere between 10 and 20 touches that a cold prospect typically needs before they convert to a sale. So the sales implementers that I know, consultants who implement sales programs into B2B companies, the best ones I know have these very elaborate, multi-channel sequences that have tons of nuance and room for nuance because it's a conversation, right? Like one sales implementer I know, he's got like a 30 sequence set, and that's not just email, that's calls and LinkedIn touches and emails and this kind of careful orchestration. And even then, the percentage of conversion from cold is, like if you're at 10%, you're doing really well. So it's a massive lift to prospect from cold like that with this careful orchestration.
Okay. And as you're going through this is great. Thank you. Like I'm just going to prove my point even better.
Yeah, I've no doubt.
To what extent is there like in my mind, I'm thinking of this as like pre-processing, but I don't know what the term would be in sales, but like before you're actually reaching out to anybody, is there a level of research or record cleanup that occurs before you're ready to actually set that sequence
Yeah,
in
I mean
motion?
there should be, and I think this varies by organization. It depends on what your budget looks like what your staffing is. If you have internal SDRs or BDRs whose sole job it is to do cold outreach, and you have a sophisticated tech stack, you've got Salesforce or HubSpot and maybe Zoom Info or Apollo.io, you've got these data tools. Yeah, I mean, in a sophisticated mid-market B2B strategy, you've got list cleanups happening, you've got research, so you're targeting based on company size, industry, headcount, like whatever metric matters to you, and then by job title into the right person. And then doing things like list cleanups where you're pinging servers of the email addresses to make sure those emails are still alive before you go spraying and praying into the wild blue yonder.
Okay. This is great. All right. Let's put numbers to this thing now because Yeah. I mean, you actually really kind of blew my mind right there. That's, that's like way more than I even anticipated for. All right. So here's what we're looking at. So we are looking at a CRM that has 5,000 contacts in it. And I'm going to assume that inside of this CRM, each contact record has roughly 35 data points associated with each contact record. And that could be, so like just the name of the company is that's a feature inside of that contact record, an email address, and then LinkedIn profile. So it kind of grows and grows. But I'm just going to say rough estimate. We know 35 individual cells in a database about each client. Let's just assume that the basic tools we need to enable this AI agent with is the ability to search the web, search LinkedIn, generating and refining outreach messages. So this is email, SMS, and call scripts. And then appointment scheduling. So let's say we're going to have a human close the deal, and this agent is going to nurture everything. So this means that per contact, the token range varies wildly, but I think 1,000 tokens is a safe bet. So if we're saying that in this entire CRM of 5,000 contacts, 5 million input tokens, 2.5 million output tokens. Again, these are such conservative estimates, especially based off of what you said. So factoring all of this together, and we're estimating 3 cents per 1,000 tokens on the input and 6 cents per 1,000 on the output. It means that every single time, this is hard costs to the software company. This is not the landed cost to the customer. This is the cost on the just the run of this agentic workflow. Every time this agent runs through this hypothetical CRM, the hard cost is $225. Now, that means that if we want to clean up the database and we want to ping the IP addresses of every single email address, $225 to do that, just that thing. And then we want to, let's say we want to do some LinkedIn research, add a field into the CRM after learning about the headcount of the company, $225 for that run. So I would say, you talked about a 30-step sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say that each step in that sequence has an additional data cleanup step. So we need to run through the CRM for research, take an action, run through the CRM for research, take an action. So in a 30-step sequence, we're going to call that 60 runs through the CRM at $225 a pop. So that means that just to run through this CRM in what you described as a single outreach, 30-step outreach event, we're talking about $13,000 landed compute costs. So this is hard costs to the provider. So we're talking that to nurture an entire CRM, this is a small CRM, mind you, we're probably talking in the range of probably $1 million a year for a company to have an agent go through and do lead nurturing in what is a very small CRM. It's 5,000 contacts. This is not a Fortune 500.
Wow. I think this is something that this kind of falls into that knowledge gap that I think the market has right now. And it's something you've brought to my awareness. And I think this might help others understand it better because it helped me understand it. Like when we are generating content for Promode, we're able to do that at a really cost-effective way. Because when we generate a blog or we generate a social post, that is one API call or one ping to the LLM, correct?
Yep.
For each piece of content. And we're able to do that because we have all these agents kind of connected to that API call. And so we're very efficient in how we are leveraging those. But when we started talking to clients about creating a chatbot, for instance, like we have a client who wants a custom chatbot, and we're like, yeah, sure, we can do that because we have your database, which is kind of the central nervous system of everything. And from that database, you can activate a chatbot, which means someone is sort of, their user, their customer is kind of reaching into that database for the info they need in way of a chat interface, right? But you explained to me that the difference is, so every time we create a piece of content, that's one API call. But in the chat world, in this interactive conversation with AI world, the API call is occurring every single time there is a chat.
Yep. Every time the user sends a message, that is not only is it a call to the API, but it is also an additional query into a database. So you were talking about how we are able to deliver what is pretty sophisticated workflows inside of Promode. Is that we have, for us, the strategy and query phase is a one-time call. Strategy is built in that single instance and then able to be used across, we've got 12 plus 6. So then we have 18 other agents, 18 other agents that are then using the results of that single call.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you do that in a chatbot. Everything that is asked is there's a research step, synthesizing the research, and then returning that.
Right. And it's funny, one way I've described this to our Promode prospects when they kind of start to look at me like, what the hell are you talking about? I'll say, well, you've used ChatGPT, right? Yes. Do you love the output? Not usually. Okay. Would you agree that if you ask a better question, you would get a better answer? Well, yeah, that seems to be a fundamental kind of truth. Like, yeah, if you ask a better question, you get a better answer. And I think what you're describing is Promode has the ability to ask a really, really good question of these LLMs because it's encrypted. So we have this much larger context window that we can approach the LLM and say, give me this. But this is like thousands of rows of data instead of a quick chat in an interface. Anyway, so that kind of decreases our cost, our hard cost with Promode. But when we get into the conversation piece, which is chatbots, which is sales enablement, lead nurture, that's where the cost becomes very high. And if it's $1 million to prospect a list of 5,000, that's certainly out of reach for any mid-market company. And when you started, I was still kind of mathing it out, and I'm like, it still could be beneficial because, a lot of B2B companies that we work with, they would be willing to bear a $3,000 to $5,000 cost per acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And really not be able to perfectly measure that at the end of the day. Yeah. And they do, they're spending millions on trade shows. Like we went to a client's the other day who's in the trade show business and hearing about how much some of these companies are spending just to appear at a trade show. It's like, okay, what's the average cost per acquisition for these multi-million-dollar contracts? Well, it could be in the thousands, sometimes tens of thousands.
Mm-hmm.
But the costs you're describing, it sounds like it's not there. And just in my own sales experience with Promode, like I've got an agency running LinkedIn automations for me because they kind of suckered me in. I'm a salesperson. Salespeople love to be sold. Like we love it. I love to buy everything. I love hearing a good pitch. Like I am like the easiest to sell to because I am so optimistic and risk tolerant, which is like dangerous. But yeah, I got onto this agency who's running these automated LinkedIn messages for me, and we're, 2.5 months in, and I'm like, we still don't have a meeting. And they're like, well, here's what you got to do. You got to really like have little conversations. Like, cause I was going in as soon as someone would respond, I'm pitching them. Like, here's a paragraph pitching. Do you want a demo? Cause I'm so excited about Promode, and that's on me. But I start thinking about it and I'm like, they're right. I do need to be more subtle with it, like ease into the pitch, have these little micro conversations. And then I'm like, how long is this going to take me? Like how many of these how many times a day am I supposed to hop into LinkedIn and judge these conversations ever so slightly so that we can one day, hopefully, it's like dating, right? Like you got to like ease into it. And I do know that that is the best approach. So I'm not arguing with them, but it's not efficient for me. Like I'm not going to do that. I would. And at that point, I started looking at the cost of that solution. Okay, that's $1,000 a month, and we're getting a deal on that. So their other customers are paying $2,500 a month just to have that initial cold message sent out. And then the salesperson has to like really nurture every single one to the point of a meeting. And it's like at that point, what am I paying for?
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I think what all of this really highlights to me is really going back to, like our ongoing discussion about services software. In my opinion, if your headcount solution for this agentic workflow that I just went through is $4 million or more, if that's what, like the team that does that, if your spend on that is over $4 million, this is a great solution. You should hire an engineer to come in and build a custom solution for your company. But like shy of that, if like that really is the benchmark in my mind for when do you use AI for something? If like the proposed solution that works, like it has to work. And that's where I think a lot of people get confused. There are tools out there that say that they do this thing that I described. And I promise you, as somebody who looks at fucking token costs all day, every day, trying to manage this, let's not let this get out of hand. Like this is top of mind for me for everything. When I see somebody that's like, yeah, we have this AI tool that will nurture your CRM and it's $125 a month. I'm like, bullshit, it does that. You are completely lying because first off, the models that you would need to use in order to have reasoning capabilities to actually make autonomous decisions on a per contact basis, you're using O1, you're using like GPT-O1, you're using O3 mini, something like that. These are the most expensive models that exist. And so shy of that, the solution is not going to work as advertised.
Yeah. There's some hidden costs, or it's just perhaps they're using AI just to write sequences and then blast those to people, but it's really not as intuitive. I think there's a misconception about what it is.
Totally.
Yeah.
If your head count for your sales team that does this nurturing if that's a 100K a month is your head count for those people, and you think that $150 a month is going to be the thing that gets the job done, you're delusional.
Sure. Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
I think any savvy business owner kind of knows that that's too good to be true. I'm curious to see what Salesforce does with Agentforce because they've been drumming it up. I don't know if it's released. I'm sure there's some betas out there somewhere. But, the CEO of Salesforce talks about how they're using retrieval augmented generation for Agentforce, which will be a Salesforce add-on. I don't know a whole lot more about it in terms of capabilities or cost, but that's one to keep an eye on for sure. And as far as we know, they will then be the second on the market for a retrieval augmented generation solution at a retail level. And the first would be Promode.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I think it's a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah, cool.
I'm excited. We hit on LinkedIn this week. Next week, I got some fun LinkedIn stuff to share with you. So
Awesome. Can't wait. As always, this podcast is sponsored by Promode.ai. Promode, the first ever and best ever AI-powered marketing platform specifically built for B2B companies. It does your blogging, your social media, your SEO, your email, newsletter writing, and delivers it all in a very easy-to-use portal. You don't have to be a marketer to use it. You cut costs drastically and have a pleasant experience marketing your brand. Thanks, Matt.
adios.
Yeah.